Welcome back to another episode of Built and Backed. Joining me today is Alfredo Mercedes, the co-founder at VU Talent Partners, a modular talent enablement platform deeply embedded within a VC firm, combining signal, workflows, and search as a service. He started his career in the Marine Corps before moving into executive search, where he helped high-growth tech companies and venture funds build teams to scale. Today, he works at the intersection of hiring, investing, automation, and network, partnering with founders to scale their businesses, and advising on how to leverage talent as a core driver of returns. Alfredo, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashley, so much for being here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you here. And I'm very excited for you to share with our listeners more about yourself and what you do if you want to get started with that.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of give a little insight. As you mentioned, I didn't start my career at all within tech. Started non-traditionally, I think, as you might call it, in the Marine Corps, in the infantry, just doing things kind of grunt work, learning how to run hard, learning how to wake up at 3:30, learning what discipline was at a very early age. That had led me to a great opportunity to become a chief of staff in the Marine Corps, doing like war planning for logistics and operations and finance and administration. Again, at a young age, I think doing something that's, although not tech related, not even recruiting related, instilled a lot of my processes and like how I very much approach things from like a systems point of view. Um, and that's actually where I started my Marine Corps or my recruiting journey. I actually got recruited by a headhunter to become a headhunter for Diverse Partners, one of the largest retained executive search firms in the world, primarily partnering with early stage VC-backed founders for their executive search. So anything in the go-to-market world, usually CEO, COO, VP of sales, VP of marketing, VP of products. At these, Series B, Series C, D, E companies that are looking to exit in the next 2, 3, 4 years. Working with investors from Sequoia, Benchmark, and NEA, right? Kind of to identify these critical gaps and how these executives can, take a company that's doing 100 million in revenue, but take them to make it 500 million, right? How do you scale that? How do you iterate on product? How do you scale your product, right? And so it was not only just recruiting, but it was very consultative in the approach, given that executives too need to be, handheld a little bit. They like to be white gloved. They're executives, right? They're playing 10, 15, 20 plus years in the industry. And so recruiting for them is a whole different world in comparison to recruiting for, entry level, assistant or, an entry level engineer. And so like those two worlds are kind of like where I spent a lot of my time. And then what now VU Talent is, I think, is a combination of both in the sense of like being very strategic driven and like ensuring that here's our mission, here's our goal, and then taking like the executive approach of being, how do we properly source candidates based on the metrics? How do we make sure that we have proper scoring? How do we do outreach to these folks that, don't necessarily want to get in flooded by 15 emails, right? They're executive, they need a whole different curated approach. And so combining these two different worlds into what I think VU Talent is today. We're a plug and play recruiting modular platform built within VU Venture Partners, a global $100 million venture firm. And we serve founders to eliminate the chaos, the noise that's beyond there in the AI world, especially today more than ever. I don't know about you, but I get probably 15 AI emails and another four on LinkedIn.
At
Because
minimum.
yeah, I'm like AI is this great capacity multiplier, right? So how do we cut through the noise? How do founders go ahead and find the right candidates that they need at the current time that they're at the current stage that they're at, and then using some type of equation to figure out, okay, well, if we're looking to scale to 20 million in revenue or we're looking to get acquired in 4 years, like we work backwards from that problem. And so we're the solution that eliminates the chaos. We like to say that we don't just recruit, we deliver outcomes because that's what that's what companies need or outcomes. And it's been a really fun journey doing all of this and kind of putting it all together into this new platform that's being born in the AI world and seeing it kind of all play out real time.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that part that you mentioned that you work with founders to kind of see where they want to be in the future and then almost like reverse engineer it if they have a specific goal in mind. And so,
Yep.
with that being said, do you ever work with founders who are like, well, I don't really know yet what my end game is? Like, do you help them with that and then come up with the right solution?
Yeah, that's usually like one of the first things that they say is, well, we don't know what the end game is. And I'm like, okay, well, let's dial it back then. Okay, what does the next 12 months look like for you? What the next
Mhm.
6 months look like for you? What are you trying to achieve? And if it's something on the sales side or current revenue metric, if it's something about, customer churn, if it's something on the products and the customer success side, like whatever those cases are, we reverse engineer the role, we reverse engineer the comp. And that also part of the strategy is reverse engineering the recruiting part, and figure out, okay, well, how do we actually make sure that the role that we need is based on those outcomes, right? If you're saying all these things about revenue, but yet you're hiring a senior AE, well, that might not be a senior AE. That might be a head of sales. That might be a chief revenue officer. That might be a VP of sales, right? And so like make sure that we're hiring for the right role based on these outcomes. And we do everything. That's why we are kind of the A to Z in the sense of like we don't just come in and are a very transactional recruiting partner. Like we want to design the systems, the templates, the scorecards, the interview process, all the way to finalizing the candidate's placement and ensuring that they stay there post, 6 months, post 2 years, post 4 years, right? So it's very important that we do that.
Yes, and that is also a good point too about the part of making sure it's actually the right position that you're hiring for. Like the founder might
Exactly.
think that it's a certain role they might need, but after speaking with you, it turns out that they need something different. And so that's one question I have too is, and this is kind of more general, but what advice would you give to founders on how they can understand which roles they should be prioritizing hiring? Of course, it relates to like what their goals are in the next
Of
year or
course.
so, but how do they know where to start with that?
I think prioritization starts with like what what the company outcomes or goals, and most of the time that's usually given by, either investors or like what you talk about in the boardrooms with them. Like, okay, well, you know, right, we want to serve, say they have 1,000 customers, we want to serve 2,000 customers by the next 6 months. Okay, well, if that's the overall company, objective, right? That's your clearly defined goal as a CEO and founder, then we have that touches almost every facet of the business outside of like legal and security and like for the most part that's going to touch sales. It's most part it's going to be everything under go to market, and it's going to be half a product. And so if those two are the lanes that we start swimming, well, figure out who do you have and currently in go to market, how many sales leaders, how many AEs, how many people in marketing, and then figure out on the technical side how many engineers do you have, how many product leaders you have, right? And we can kind of start to do a little bit again, the reverse engineering, and do like a very good headcount planning to ensure that they're not bloated in certain areas, right? If their goal is to get double their customer count within 6 months, but yet they have, a stacked team of 15 engineers and two AEs, well, we know what the problem is. We can identify that problem. We can now start to design the role based on that outcome of, okay, well, we need double the customer rate in the next 6 months. So we need to probably double or triple our headcount as it relates to sales, right? Or hiring, maybe a head of sales or, senior AE that can come in and take a lot of that player coach mentality and drive strategic sales, but also coach the other folks to get better as well, right? We don't have to necessarily hire
Mhm.
four more people. We can maybe hire one senior person who can bring on accounts and also help coach the new guys or the guys that are, currently in the team to enable them to be better, right? And so it's not just about, adding teams to these companies or adding people, because that's another thing that we try to avoid, right? We're not in the world of bloat. We're not arguably that era was a great era back in, the COVID days during ZERP when every company was, 500 million in revenue and 500 people. But now teams are scaling, to 20 million with 10 people. They're scaling
Yeah.
to 50 million with 15 people. And so like you have to be very engineerative, if that's even a word, and go back, to the ways that we used to, I think. And it's been really, really interesting working with these guys. Because they're also smart. The founders are, they there's a certain scale of economics for startups. Y Combinator talks about this all the time, that scaling a company is almost mathematics to a degree with a little bit of like human heuristics added in there, right? You have a certain product that has to reach a certain amount of people, and then you kind of take that and you literally just scale that as kind of an output. And so like how do we think of talent in that way, especially in AI world that we're heading into? Like it has to be very strategic. It has to be kind of this force multiplier um in every sense of the words. So
Yes, definitely. And that's really interesting what you mentioned too about the startups that are scaling to really high revenue with like a lean team. It's not always like you shared about having more team members to get more money. You could really have a solid, smaller team number that can help you get to those bigger outcomes. So I love that you shared
Exactly.
that reminder because I think people don't always remember that.
No, no, not. I mean, we use it internally too. At the same sense, we're like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to hire, three more researchers, or maybe we don't need to hire, another marketing person. Like, right, we can just go on, you know, in Gamma and make a beautiful presentation in 5 minutes, or I can, hire a marketing assistant to do this in, the same time frame and have to pay them as well. And so, like, simple things like that, I think, are becoming more frame of thought as these kind of uh, technology advances happen over the next 3, 6, 12 months and then beyond too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I know that you have co-founded VU Talent Partners within VU Venture Partners, and so I'd love to
Yep.
hear what that has been like. Like, what led you to being able to co-found this within the venture firm?
That was a pretty long conversation. So originally I started at VU Venture Partners as their head of platform, which a head of platform role in the VC terms are usually roles that are non-investor like, and they act kind of as like the strategic operator, like of the platform. So think of the VC firm as a platform, everything kind of pre-investment, right? Ensuring that the company is showing up properly in the market how they want to attract, the portfolios that are of interest to them. Whether that's like doing certain marketing events, whether that is recruiting internally for the company to make sure they have better partners or LPs. And then usually things post investment. So again, helping some of the portfolios and their talent operations, or helping a firm put on, maybe you know, a, a a speed kind of interview, for their portfolio companies and certain operators out there, or do some type of TED talk, like whatever it is, right? So I came on to VU Venture, kind of the head of platform, and what we found was a lot of the company's needs, a portfolio company needs, were talent related, right? Kind of makes sense, right? Like Steve Jobs said it kind of historically that the only thing that really matters is talent in the companies. That's how companies are birthed. It's how companies grow, right? It's a product is created by people, and so people are the underlying, the common denominator in every situation. And so we were like, okay, well, let's switch that idea. Let's not have me head of platform. Let me just focus on the talent side. And then we quickly realized again, well, the founders need very strategic support. These guys are not just looking for, hey, can you just send me a resume of a guy that might be interested? Like they need, hey, I don't know what my comp should be for this role that I might hire in the next 6 months. Can you help me, right? Or they're like, hey, we're at the final stages, but we need a scorecard. This guy based on, what we're looking to do in the next 12 months. Again, like a lot of these kind of uh, arbitrary asks per se, like a lot of these like non very you can't do this in a recruiting model. Recruiting firms aren't able to do a lot of these helps. And so we decided spin out the model completely, take it out of VU Venture Partners, give it the full business resources, and then really be strategic and really be kind of intentional on what we deliver. And that's three things. We deliver sprints where we go, okay, well, hey, you need two candidates in 16 days based on these metrics with this scorecard. We deliver that. Or you
Mhm.
say, hey, we're looking to do talent. We need our whole ATS and CRM infrastructure. We also want to do maybe some AI workflow, or maybe we want to do some comp modeling or head count planning. So we do strategic design. And then the last one is we do kind of a full platform or full stack platform search in which we combine the entire harness of the platform, the entire network that we're inside of, VU Venture Partners, and we do a full retained kind of search as your co-pilot. Help again, kind of give you a capacity multiplier. Not kind of be this third party agency, but no, correct it directly with your ATS, connect directly with your CRM, and like spin up search as literally if you're adding on, two or three heads of talent at one given point. Um, and so it's been really fun. I don't think there's anyone that does what we do. Most venture firms have like a talent partner, or like a, head of talent, or, partner of talent. Um, but again, those roles, their scope is so limited. What they're able to do and accomplish is literally just send out like resumes or do introductions, which are great. And we're not saying those aren't wrong because that's part of the world I live in as well. But like, if you want your company to be successful, you have to give them the systems, you have to give them outcomes, and you have to be able to execute. And that's what we deliver.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice that you have there. Kind of like reminds me of the whole notion of not just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping that it sticks, but having like
Yep.
intention and systems and processes behind what you're doing, behind everything that you're doing.
And then furthermore, one of our things that we do is we give it to them. Like what sucks about traditional recruiters that are third party is that usually it's very transactional. Hey, I need, five AEs, or hey, I need a VP of sales. Okay, and then that's it. You find them that person and they handshake, you pay them the money, and that's it. We said, no, 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 no. This is also not. This is where is the value of that to the founder when that person doesn't make it past 6 months, or when they need to rethink scale because now they're at 500 million and that person doesn't fit into them anymore. Well, so we decided to a lot of the stuff that we give and implement is inside their systems currently. So we give them the tools, the workflow, the scorecarding, the headcount planning with the research, all the experimentation of the logs that we do for sourcing, like it's all given as this package. That way, when they do need to hire someone else of similar caliber, or when that role in 2 years, that person isn't, they scale to their kind of end of their limit, they can find another person, right? It gives confidence to more of these founders that are, starting their first company or their second company and at that very critical inflection point, in which talent is literally like the main war effort. I mean, you see it across every Meta and Perplexity, and all these guys are battling hundreds of $1 million to go fight for engineers, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a competitive space. So it's like having the right partner like yourself to be able to deliver the outcomes that the founder is looking for. I think it's huge in this world that we live in right now.
Yeah, it is more than ever because you have these kind of two. I feel like you have these two kind of conflicting things right now. It's happening in the venture space. On the one side, you have this idea in which Sam Altman keeps talking about. I think he's one of the first people that birthed it was we're going to have our first, single person $1 billion unicorn company. Someone is going to be able to create a company on their own and scale it to $1 billion of revenue, which has never happened, right? I mean, I don't know what the data is of the smallest team to ever achieve 1 million of revenue, but it's not one. It's probably not close to one to get to $1 billion of revenue. It's a pretty large number, but he predicts with the advancement of AI and like people's abilities that we'll be able to just grow and scale companies with less and less people. And so you have this idea, which begs the question, what's going to happen with recruiting? What's going to happen with investments? What's going to happen with talent? Like, if you don't need people to grow companies, well, what do people do? So you have that kind of, very conflicting thought. And then on the other side, right now, what you're seeing is like job, I mean, a heavy war on wages and cutoffs across the board. But then like this underlying sentiment is like everyone is so motivated to do something within the AI space, especially in the venture capital world that I live in, the technology specifically. Like everyone is, kind of unclear what that future looks like, but like for whatever the reason is, like there's this very strong sunlight through the clouds, and it's AI, and it's like, okay, well, we can do stuff that we never did before. We don't know what the future looks like. Maybe companies might, maybe I might get fired in 3 months because we restructure, but like I'm excited to do this. I want to do this. I get to work with technology that hasn't been done before. I get to do something that maybe create something that no one's done before, right? And so like these two kind of worlds are merging, and that's why you get a lot of like the uncertainty and like the gloominess, and you see all the reports from big companies still doing layoffs, but yet you see roles on LinkedIn everywhere. I'm head of this, AE for that, VP for this, and like so it's kind of at this weird intersection. So I'm hoping that things clear out, but it's also a good time to be a recruiter, to talk to so many different cool people, um, and see like all the things that they're working on, and like you're literally at like the forefront because you're having conversations across different industries, across different types of job titles, and so you're not just focusing on certain things, and it's really exciting. It's a great time.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up about like the kind of dual conflict that we're seeing here of like
Yep.
all these roles being open and like startups constantly hiring for stuff, but then also like the looming AI, well, oh, we can automate a lot of this stuff and not necessarily need butts and seats, so to say, to do this.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that you called that out because I think that's something that a lot of people are seeing. But to your point, there's still a lot of hiring going on, and I don't think people are going
Yep.
to be completely replaced anytime soon.
No, no. I think hiring will look differently.
Mhm.
Like the hiring processes and recruiting processes will look differently with AI and will continue to look differently. We'll probably be at a weird point where we'll do a lot more video, like AI avatar type of interviews or something like that, right? Like we'll probably get to a point where we're doing, interviews like that. But then like that's not gonna replace the interview process. Like people still need to be interviewed, right? But then on the other hand, like you have the actual recruiting and talent process, but then like the job, like the actual like butt in the seat, so to speak. Like if AI is doing all these advancements, well, you need less people. But again, a lot of what I think some people hypothesize, which I think is true, is that well, humans are driven by the need to do something. So like by creating AI, we'll create other technologies and or things that we'll have to do anyway, and like we'll find ourselves in jobs once more again. Like there's never been a time that humans have not had a job, even through the most like you know most all the revolutions, the industrial revolution, like when every single farm worker thought that they're going to be taken out by some machine. Well, no, people became the machine operators like that, and it makes
Yeah.
sense, right? Same with AI, like it's going to be the same concept. I don't think maybe for certain roles, I do think there probably might not be as a need. Maybe some, roles that involve purely numbers or research. But there'll still always be like a human behind the wheel, so to speak, right? Driving the models, right? And so like that's why I'm coding and doing a lot of things that I never thought I'd do because well, it's important for job security. It's important for understanding how to do it in the future because you think everyone works on a computer now. Well, the world will literally have to be working with AI in 10 years, like every role will require an AI use. And so you definitely should get in the forefront of it and start learning, not necessarily coding or that degree, but like how to use ChatGPT at its basics and then take that to the advanced level, right? How to use Perplexity, how to use Claude, um, how to use any other kind of AI tool at your disposal because arguably every role outside of like physical work, which we haven't even talked about robotics and AI, like outside of physical work will change. And
Yeah.
so we kind of have to be at the forefront.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you gave that analogy. I was speaking with someone recently who was talking about it in a similar fashion to when the internet first came out and how so many people were so worried about the internet coming. And now look at how we've adapted in the past 25 or so years since
Hmm.
then. And now
Hmm.
we quite literally can't live without the internet. Like we need
Quite
it.
literally
So
not. Yeah.
so you phrased it
Literally.
perfectly with AI
Yeah,
too. Like it's going to be here, adapt to it, but you still have the opportunity to keep doing things and keep growing.
exactly. Exactly. And that's why I said it's exciting. It's definitely nerve-wracking, right? There's a little sense of uncertainty, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think actually that's probably one of the things that is kind of fueling the venture capital space is that there's uncertainty because no one knows what we're doing or where we're heading. But what that unlocks is the ability to do something great, right? That unlocks the ability to create something that hasn't been created before. And so like people are motivated now more than ever to go start a business online or to do something with a piece of technology or to go try something because people, I mean, my grandma uses ChatGPT. Like, so everyone's empowered to go out and do stuff now. And so it's a fun time to be a recruiter. It's a fun time to work in technology. Certainly, uncertainty across the board, but like I think that's kind of the same motivation or that underlying power that people have to work hard right now and to try something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
for founders who are getting ready to make that executive hire, beyond the importance of like kind of having a goal that they want to reach to help kind of guide what that hire would be, what advice would you have for them for just getting started with the hiring process? Like something that you think would be really important for them to know or make sure is done before they begin with their recruiting processes and systems.
Well, I think specifically for executive hiring, usually when you start to do an executive hire, like you're at the point in which you need C-level executive, right? I mean, there's executive hire has a little bit of a broad definition because an executive can be really anybody necessarily who, holds a team or management title. But so like it varies, but usually when we say executive hire, we're usually specifically saying C-level executive, someone in the C-suite, chief product officer, chief sales officer, chief revenue, chief operations, chief legal, right? Whatever the case is, if your company's at that point where you're looking to hire some type of C-level executive, well, first you got to make sure that like you have the cap table, the money, the runway, like because executives aren't cheap. Like it's a fact. I mean, you're looking at minimum, let's just say $250,000 plus for just annual salary. And like, if your company doesn't have the runway, but of 6 months, and you're looking to pay $250,000 within a year, I mean, that might be a little tricky for, your profit margins. And so like understanding that executives are expensive, the better the executive, the more expensive, right? And that's nature by people, right? If that person comes from you know, OpenAI, if they come from OpenAI, Twitter, and Zoom, right, all at their growth stages, well, I can guarantee that those companies pay them substantial, right? And so if you want that same talent, oftentimes you have to pay for that talent. That also includes equity. Like that, people forget to discuss equity. Executives take a heavy chunk of equity because they are an executive, right? So you can get anywhere from 1 to 5%, which if a company's scaling at its Series B or C, they probably don't have, but 20% allocated for the employees left. And so that executive can take up a quarter of that just for that
Mhm.
one person. And if that person doesn't make it past a year or 2 years, like then how much money you wasted, potential of equity loss, like so you have to be really thoughtful about that on the compensation part. That's one of the first things that you usually have to be very proactive on ensuring that, especially if it's something, a revenue leader, for example, they cost a lot more. Why? Because they also get a bonus that's high significant to the company's milestones. And so, you know, if their package is, call it 400,000 for just a salary, plus, you know, they get a 80% commission structure, like it, you could be dumping money into them, but as long as they obviously bring money to you. So that's one of the first things that I think. And then when the second piece is kind of uh, I hate to use the word cultural because I feel like it's overthrown, but the dynamic that you're looking at for this person to bring. Most of the time when you hire an executive, um, you have to understand that you're hiring a person from an outside world coming into and like getting the ability to be in your system, to be in your company, but then have direct ability to change certain things, change outcomes, change team sizes, change that department's function. Like you're giving them the master key to unlock. And so you have to be very cognizant, very mindful to understand that like is a team ready for that dynamic, right? Because a lot of times these executives come in and they already have a playbook in mind. They have certain people in mind. They have certain processes that they instill. And like oftentimes what we saw with founders is that these executives come in and they just immediately clash heads with his founders, or the team that's currently sitting because that team has been there since the beginning, and this girl is coming from a different company, right? And so being very mindful of those two things, I think, are extremely important pre-executive hire.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. Making sure that you A, have the right amount of runway, and then B, making sure it's the right cultural fit. And you brought up a good point in terms of
Yeah.
the money piece that founders often forget that anyone they hire can go for equity. And so that was going to be my next question is like, say if a founder might not have the amount of runway that they would like in order to give the executive the salary they
Mhm.
deserve, beyond equity, what are some things that you see founders offering these people that are really like enticing or just might want to draw them in and work for the company if the salary isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I've only laughed because I've had some very lucrative conversations and like creative
I can
founders
imagine.
of, yes, at the executive level, right? If a CEO, is like, we're growing and we need the best of the best, um, and the guy or the girl that's getting interviewed is like, maybe not. There's been some very creative tactics to try to get them on the line. Everything from, I mean, I like the Starbucks CEO where they'll not startups usually don't. buy planes and stuff like that. No, but if you see that, right, the Starbucks CEO, he has a private jet that flies him to and from wherever he needs. Well, who's given that jet? The board of directors, right? They pay for that incentive. For early stage founders, it's been as similar stuff where they'll say, okay, well, all the company expenses are paid, but not only paid, but we're willing to give you, business class, once a month, right? Or I've seen things companies say, well, we'll pay a stipend, $5,000 for your home in wherever, New York, right? So you have like certain incentives like that monetarily. There's also been like bumps in the sense of like, hey, we don't have the money now. We can give you equity, but what we can do is you help us achieve, the 5x that we're looking for, or you help us get us to this milestone. We'll give you the, a zero point 0.5 or 1% increase in equity, fully vested, right? And like they'll make
Mhm.
it super lucrative where like that money is be able to be returned as cash almost immediately into their pockets, right? And usually you see that a lot of times in sales side and the revenue side, where the sales leader is like, okay, I want to come in, I want to grow you guys. Like they're also incentivized to do it, right? It makes sense for them to come in and want to scale them 10x because then that bump that they're talking about, well, it's a lot more lucrative for them. It's a lot more incentivized for them. And so there's
Mhm.
very different tactics. I've seen founders lie to candidates home on the night of
My
and take the
gosh.
dinner wives out to dinners and present them in fancy watches. Like, I mean, it goes back to what Steve Jobs said. Like, people are the underlying factor of companies, or the reason why any company exists in the world, because a person had an idea and they surround themselves with other people who push that idea forward. And so, if you're that founder and if you're a believer in that, then you have the mindset to do whatever it takes. And hopefully the mission is enough. I do
Mhm.
think that there's it's not every day that the founder has to go out there and helicopter to another guy's house, and that hopefully that's not even in the case, right? Because that candidate, that person that's at that point, like believes in the company so much that they're willing to take the risk, or they're willing to maybe cut back on the costs, right? So that's part of the coaching strategy too, as a recruiter, especially at the executive level, is that you can't just put someone in the process and take your hands off. Like, you have to also advise them that, like, hey, on the first 5 calls, you were excited about this, and now all of a sudden that the salary is 50,000 less, you're like, no, I don't want to do this. Like, is salary that important? You're saying that, so we walk through, what does your family look like? What do you need for you to be happy? What do you need for you to be successful now, right? Like, and really get to the bottom of things. Okay, well, 50,000 you wanted was extra because you just bought you know, because your kid is going to university. Okay, well, maybe we can figure out a way that, we pay, the university stipend directly, right? We give you the kid stipend of, 20,000 a year, 30,000 a year, right? And so, like, maybe you don't need the cash, right, directly to you, but maybe we do a stipend to your kid. So there's a bunch of different ways you can go through it, but you have to be really informative on the candidate. You have to be really informative to the client, and make sure it's a matchmaking process, because at the end of the day, people are selfish, and they want their company to take best care of them, but
Mhm.
in the return, the company wants them to take best care of the company, right, and provide everything. And so it has to be an equal. It has to be a match. You can't just have a company that's willing to give everything to an employee who's not going to work, and then vice versa, employee who you know wants to work day in and day out, but the company's barely handing them anything. And so, like, we have to fine tune those kind of uh, parts of the equation to get the right output.
Oh, 100%. And on the opposite end, since of course you do a lot of work with the candidates directly, what advice would you have for anyone who's looking to get into these executive roles, especially ones that might be more competitive, that might involve like several interview rounds and
Yep.
perhaps any projects that they need to complete? Like, I would love to hear your advice for that for anyone who's listening who might be in that situation themselves right now.
Yeah, once you realize you're at the executive standpoint, you might not even be at the executive standpoint, but maybe you're interested in up leveling your career, or like, hey, I've been a manager for a few years. I'm interested in being a director, or I'm interested in being a VP, or maybe I have 15 years of military experience. I don't have to necessarily start at entry level. I can come in right as a VP, right? It depends on how you get to the executive, but if you're starting to look at the executive roles, I think what's important is Honestly, branding. Branding more than anything. When I say branding, it's personal branding, professional branding, not just your resume, right? Your resume is I don't know anyone that uses resumes anymore, to be honest. I don't know. Resumes are even executives, like it's a formality. It's literally a formality if they ask for a resume. I asked for it for formality. Um, Everything else usually lives on your LinkedIn. And so LinkedIn is the only platform that exists today in the world for executives, for business professionals, for industry experts, for thought leaders, that allows you to engage with other people. And so your LinkedIn is going to be the first place that recruiters are going to go to, most likely, to see who you are. The hiring manager is going to go to see who you are, right? And so if your LinkedIn isn't up to date is a bare minimum. Like
Yeah.
there's up to date with the picture, right? With the clear about, with the clear experience, right? Like with a good headshot, like those are just like the bare minimum to set your profile up, right? And as executive, you should be doing 10 times more of that, right? Like you should have a very clear, featured section with maybe thought posts that you've done or, things that resonate with founders or other executives, right? As an executive, you're not just the team coach, but you also are a thought leader for the company. You have leadership responsibilities. And so like they want to see that on your LinkedIn. They want to see that you are personable and curated in maybe blogs that you write about or comments that you post on LinkedIn, or certain special initiatives you've done, right? Like those need to all show up on your LinkedIn as an executive. On your LinkedIn specifically too, um, people often forget that like recruiters scan profiles all the time. And so sometimes people, especially executives, I don't know why, they love to hide everything as if they're the best of the best and they like to be secret. And I'm like, okay, well, that also just diminishes your chances of getting roles out there that could be life changing, right? Because if I'm a recruiter and I go to your LinkedIn and you have absolutely nothing, well, I can't judge you. And so I'm just going to move on to the next person. And that other person could be quote unquote worse, but posted everything about them online. And so I actually get to read and judge and score and like, well, they have the higher score now, right? And so like just put your LinkedIn stuff on there, put your outcomes, how you achieved your outcomes, what you did for the company, not what you were overseeing, right? Like what, I helped scale company 2x. I drove customer retention to 25%. I, you know, did 6 marketing initiatives to boost to 100,000 followers. Like, I led a team of 12 engineers and implemented our first product line. Like you need to say what you did, how you did it, how that led to an outcome, especially the executive level. Again, at the executive level, you literally come in to achieve an outcome, right? A lot of times, executives, for instance, the CRO would usually come in when it was time for the company to try to figure out an exit, right? Same with the finance leader. Companies really only invest in a chief finance officer when it's time for them to do audits, when it's time for them to go through certain processes because they're trying to get acquired, they're trying to go public. And so, as a recruiter, if I can't see that information in your profile or you don't have it publicly posted, well, you shot yourself in the foot on, maybe helping, the next ChatGPT or the next OpenAI go public or the next whatever company go public. And so they're very important. Branding is, I- I'm a stickler when it comes to branding because it is, I mean, that's literally how you show yourself to the world. And people, unfortunately, we are human. We have biases, we have perception, um, kind of templates in our mind. And if I'm going to your LinkedIn, which again, unless you show me a different platform, there's no other platform that, you know, recruiters or companies can, there's Indeed and Jobzilla and I don't even know the other ones, but like it's not networking, it's not,
Yeah.
it's so your LinkedIn has to be on point. And again, if you're an executive and your LinkedIn is not on point, I would suggest I would advise not hiring you. I'd be like, look, this guy doesn't even have the proper time or the interest to put into their, professional development and professional imaging. Like how can they properly lead a company to do the same? Like how can they, are they going to be telling their employees not to do that? No, it's important for that as well. So
Oh, yeah. That sounds like that's the hill that you would die on, is having
That
like
is
professional branding.
that is literally I'm a stickler for I have all my friends, all my colleagues, employees, anyone on LinkedIn is always like, Fredo, how's my LinkedIn? I'm like, A minus, B plus, D, F, no good rating at all. I spend hours like your LinkedIn is like a livable, breathable version of you online,
Oh
especially
yeah.
in the business world, right? And so like people change daily, right? And so I don't say you should change your LinkedIn daily, no, but you definitely should be, constantly updating it, tweaking it, um, putting yourself in your box. And what I mean by box is like who are you and how do you state that on LinkedIn will help you unlock new networking opportunities, new job opportunities. Um, because when people go on it, they're going to have immediate biases, immediate assumptions, right?
Hmm.
And it's also similarly, if you go to someone's LinkedIn, usually it's like the first, excuse me, usually it's like in the first 3 seconds, you already know if you want to connect with that person. You might not even have anything to do with their lives, but why? Because they have something you're like, this is a good profile. I just connect with this guy, right? You want to get that ambiance, you want to give that aura on your LinkedIn. Um, and like by no means is LinkedIn the one-stop shop for anything, but it is you know, one of the foundational piece of technology that people in talent, people in recruiting use, any type of business owner, entrepreneur, a lot of leaders across different industries and verticals. And so if you're not on it, and if you're not doing it properly, especially as an executive, you're missing out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point too that you mentioned like across all verticals, LinkedIn is huge. And that's one thing I would love to hear your perspective on as well
Yep.
as like for anyone who's listening to this episode who wants to get into talent and recruiting for startups like you have been, like what advice would you have for them for just getting started in this career?
Start a LinkedIn. Yeah,
The answer for
if you don't,
everything.
yes, if you don't have anything, get familiar with LinkedIn. I say beyond that, like if you want to be a recruiter, if you want to work in talent, if you want to work in venture capital, even as a whole, like you have to become, I don't want to say an expert because no one's necessarily an expert overnight, and certainly it takes years for that. But you have to familiarize yourself with the world. So start reading, blog posts from top known investors. Start watching podcasts on founders of companies that have scaled to 100 million, 200 million, half a billion. The perplexities of the world, right? The lovable, the dusts, right? Start looking at those. And you can even go back further. You don't have to do the new ones. You can literally watch Steve Jobs, his press notes and conferences. And I mentioned him because he's often looked to as one of the godfathers of technology, and also like his people leadership skills were, I mean, they were unmatched in every sense of the word. And so like, you go watch and listen to his podcasts, not podcasts, but his press conferences or, his keynote speaking at Apple when he talked about what they were doing. And when when Apple decided to create the iPhone and design it the way they did, and everyone was like, no one's gonna want to buy this thing. And he was like, no, well, just like what Tesla does, he's like, they're gonna have no choice. The customer is gonna live within our walls. We don't live within the customer's walls, right? We're gonna design something crazily different, and people are gonna become obsessed about it. And 25 years later, they still design the most simple and elegant, but yet most obsessed over pieces of technology to this day, right? Everyone can identify what it looks like from a mile away. And so like you really, really want to like get clear on that. And just watching videos, podcasts, blogs, reading books, as simple as that, good way to start. And then beyond that, talking with people.
Mhm.
Um, literally, start networking with folks that are in your industry and adjacent industries. Um, if you can go to any type of in-person conference, whether it's like a startup conference or whether it's, a dinner of some sort or whatever the case is, like find where people are, gathering, locating at in the world. And introduce yourself, try to make conversation, or listen, right? You don't have to necessarily be the talking. You can be the listening guy. And there's say you can't go anywhere. Well, a lot of these stuff is online. You can see a lot of free courses online. I mean, you can even go through like Stanford or Harvard's online courses that they have for free on like AI or on leadership or on technology, right? Like there are a bunch of courses that you can do for free if you want to just get yourself a good foundational layer of like, okay, well, I want to be a recruiting leader, or hey, I want to work in venture capital. Well, you're gonna need these traits. You're gonna need these kind of thoughts and insights. So those are all good places to kind of begin your journey.
Absolutely. And I love what you shared about, especially being able to find people that you admire who inspire you to really follow. And so that leads me to my next question that I'd love to ask you is I'd love to have you give a shout out to someone who's doing something cool in tech right now that you're really admiring and has really inspired
Yes.
you recently.
I think a good one is shout out to Austin Ritter. He actually just got into a new venture firm. Shout out to him because he is probably the only person that I've seen and I've talked to that is of the same mindset of how do we use AI technologies to multiply our capacity, not necessarily replace us. And so being very strategic and working with investment firms on using AI technology to drive workflow, to drive revenue, to drive capacity, right? To make a human who, has to spend maybe 6 hours or 4 hours doing something, now they can spend 2 hours, right? Or, making sure that the firm is using certain technologies um, to just ease their day, whether it's like, hey, something as cool as like he's created the ability for like your emails to be distilled down into like very simple Slack messages based on like priority and rating, but as it relates to like investment opportunities that your firm gets, right? And so, because as an investor, you get inflooded with emails and texts and phone calls of like, hey, I have the best company, please give me 20 million, right? And so, like, rather than having to go dig through every pitch deck and every email and every LinkedIn message, he's automated the way for it to give you a daily digest of just the top ones that match your investment thesis and your profiles and your industries based on the network and everything. So as an investor, you have, you know, call it 3 or 4 Slack notifications of what's important for you versus however many you might get a day, right? And so shout out to him because he's always keeping me on my toes. And if he watches this, I'm coming for you, and I love you. So keep doing good stuff.
That was such a good shout out.
Yeah,
Alfredo, this has been such a fun episode, and I've so enjoyed having you come on the show to share everything that you're doing at VU Talent Partners. And now I'd love to have you share with the listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to connect.
yeah. Like LinkedIn, another sneak peek. And if you're not on there, Alfredo Mercedes on LinkedIn. I also have a Substack that you can go ahead and follow, where I kind of give my very like intimate but personal thoughts on where I think technology and talents and people are going to be at as it plays out over the next few years. So
And I will link to both those places in the show notes. That way, our listeners can easily find you from there. But thank you so much again for coming on this week's episode.
thank you, Ashley. Appreciate it.